Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who's coming at you faster than a Wayne Rooney free kick. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
There's no way to be coming faster than that, but I am here.
You saw the free kick, right?
Oh, I sure did.
DC versus Toronto.
I enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah.
I do enjoy the DC fans slowly coming out of the woodwork as the playoffs creep ever closer.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of happening to me. I'm starting to feel it a little more. I used to be very just neutral, like, I live 100 miles from that city. That's not my team. Now I'm starting to think,
I'm just saying, Daryl showed up today. He's wearing a black jacket. He's drinking a black and red Coke Zero. Suddenly, I feel like maybe the DC colors are coming out.
That's weird. Unless DC United bought Coca-Cola.
That would be a big deal. That would be a very big deal.
Plus, 0 is how many points they had for a long time.
That's also true.
Okay, on today's show.
Shots fired at pre-Wayne Rooney, DC United?
Yep,
all right.
RFK, DC United. Today's show, we have 5 wonderful listener questions. It's the final show of the week. We're taking Friday off. We're rewarding ourselves for a week of hard work with a Friday off.
We're recording with the sun out. It's exciting. There's daytime sunshine. I feel like a human.
It's a daylight total soccer show. Yeah. We've had normal levels of caffeine. We're not artificially alive with caffeine. All right, 5 good questions. You ready to get to them?
Let's do it.
Okay. First one comes from John Youngblood. John wants to know, who is the best option to play the number 6 for the United States going forward?
I don't know about going forward, but I know that if you're going backward, it's Michael Bradley. See what I did there? That just came to me. I say that mostly because I'm aware of how bad that joke was, and I promise it wasn't pre-written. I do think, though... Thank you. I do think, though, to start, there is a decent chance it will be Michael Bradley as that number 6, at least for the first few games, or at least for maybe the remainder of the 2018 schedule. Maybe that January camp we see Michael Bradley as well when we have
against
a new
England
coach.
and Italy.
Yeah, because I think...
That wasn't the question, though.
No, I think there's going to be a lot of changeover. He brings the experience, maybe a little bit of locker room stability, so I think he'll still be in there. Going forward, my answer is genuinely one of Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, or Kellen Acosta.
Lovely.
And I kind of don't know. Maybe 2 of them. Maybe we have 2 6s instead of just 1. But either way, I think those are the 3 most likely to rotate around that spot.
Can we start with that? The 2
Sure.
6s versus just 1. If you'd asked me pre-30 night, I would have been 100% all in on, we need to play a 4-2-3-1. We don't have a player who can play the number 6 on his own. But for those who are not aware, the number 6 is the defensive midfielder. We need to have like 2 people sitting next to each other, maybe Adams and McKennie. Watching the USA against Peru and the way that we had Kellen Acosta, we did a whole show about it, very smartly playing as one of the 8s, but also being smart enough to come back and join the number 6, who was Will Trapp. It's made me convinced that this system can work, where you have one designated number 6, as long as you've got someone else willing to help and not go charging up the field and leave him on his own. In that case, my choice, like hands down, if I was the coach tomorrow, my choice starting would be Tyler Adams. As the number 6 for all kinds of reasons.
That shock noise you didn't hear was me not being shocked by that answer.
I mean, do you agree with me? Do you disagree?
I honestly, I don't know.
I've got a list of reasons if you need convincing.
I will need a little convincing, and it's genuinely why I wrote one of those 3, because like it could be Kellen Acosta. He's done that previously, but he did do very well in the number 8 role, as you talked about. He's
really enjoyable going forward.
But I would say that's kind of the case for Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams as well, that they've done very well in advanced positions. I think of Tyler Adams as like a person who can roam around. I basically don't want to say hunter-killer. That's a weird way to put that one. But he is. He roams around. He makes plays. You never know where he is, and suddenly he's there.
You see the new apex predator?
There you go.
It's what we used to call peak Michael Bradley, right? He would just roam the field and eat whatever he wanted.
And so I think to keep him as a number 6, it limits him a little bit. And so that's why I kind of struggle with making it Tyler Adams. And then Weston McKennie, I kind of don't know if that's his best position. He may end up being a 10 for Schalke. He may end up being an 8. Who knows? He may end up being a right back. They seem to try him in a lot of spots.
So my case for Tyler Adams is he is the best player defensively of Acosta, McKennie, Will Trapp, Michael Bradley, you name them. Tyler Adams, to me, is the best defensive midfielder in terms of, one, covering ground defensively. There's not like a ball through that he's not going to be fast enough to get to. In terms of, 2, reading what's happening. I think he's really good at reading the play and intercepting. And 3, just straight up winning 50-50s. Tyler Adams is much better than any other of those players. So that's why I trust him to play as the deepest holding midfielder. I also like his the speed with which he passes and his aggressiveness in playing forward passes, I think he'd also be great at starting moves once he wins the ball back. So, like, win it, counter-attack, I think Tyler Adams is the guy to be at the base of midfield.
Okay. The thing is, though, like, a lot of what you've just said also describes why he could be a potential disaster as a number 6. Because if you're aggressively running around trying to cover all this distance, as you said he can do, that's not necessarily what you want your 6 to be doing. And especially in the system against Peru, you want them sitting and somebody else doing that work.
I feel like I've been quoted out of context.
Okay.
Because I don't mean that he's running around all over there. What I mean is if he sits centrally in defensive midfield, if something happens like 15 yards to his right and it's just his job to get there fast and snuff out the danger, I trust him to get there faster than Bradley, Trapp, Acosta or McKennie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess so. But don't you feel like in doing that, you're limiting a key part of his game, which does seem to me to be the ability to roam around and cause problems and like pop up in random areas because he is able to find that space that other players can't?
Possibly, but I think McKennie and Acosta can do that almost as well, but they can't defend as well as Tyler Adams. And I almost think it might be good at international level to almost focus his abilities and his strengths into a key area, right? And especially if we need to be disciplined against, like a Colombia or a Brazil, I think it works a lot better. If we get more of the ball and we're going forward a lot more, then also he's freer to sort of, make runs and join the attack. So that's why for me it's Tyler Adams. Obviously there are a lot of other options. I'm not convinced that I'm always right.
All right. And I'm not convinced you're wrong, to be fair. It's more so that like I'm maybe not as familiar or as confident with some of the opinions that you've just espoused. So, for example, like I am surprised to hear you say that you think he is like light and day, definitely the best defender between him, McKennie, and and Acosta. So, why do you say that?
Because I've seen him play for New York Red Bulls, where it's been his job to shut down the opposition creative player.
Okay.
Whether it's been like I've seen him do it to Maxi Morales for NYCFC. I've seen him do it to Atlanta United with Miguel Almiron, where he's been the guy that either man marks or stands in front and blocks passes going into the key creative player, and he's been successful in shutting it down, right? And I've never really seen Acosta or McKennie do that specific job. So that's why I have a lot more faith in Tyler Adams to do that than anybody else.
All right.
Yeah.
And my final question for you, I know this feels like a cross-examination maybe.
I feel confident. I feel like an innocent man who's getting cross-examined for something he didn't do.
No, it's just more like I'm happy for it to be Tyler Adams, but I want to feel more confident than I do in that decision because I guess the other thing is that like in the scenarios that you're describing, isn't that a little bit of like 1v1 he is sticking with that person or really focused on defending that one individual player?
Yeah, but he's also gone and then influenced the rest of the game. So it's a lot of sort of what we talked about with Kellyn Acosta. This is all best case scenario, I think. But like what we talked about with Kellyn Acosta is he was joining the attack against Peru, but he was coming back and blocking off the angles. I saw Tyler Adams in those two. I mean, I didn't watch every New York Red Bulls game, of course. Right? These are just the two games that I saw. He was contributing to the attack and the rest of the play and defending elsewhere. But he was also constantly aware that his job was to cut off the supply to Morales for NYCFC or for Almiron for Atlanta.
All right.
Yeah.
And my final one is we saw Will Trapp on against Peru doing, I forgot what night it was, Tuesday night, right? We saw him doing a lot of organizing, a lot of talking and communicating and pulling people back and telling them where they need to be or telling them when to step. Is that something that you think Tyler Adams already does, or is that something that you think he would grow into?
Ooh, I don't know. I see him talk a lot, but I don't know what he's saying, right? So I don't know if he's organising like, hey, move left 2 yards, that kind of, or if he's just a chatty Cathy.
All right. So I mean, so I think that's the other thing is you want somebody who's going to stay disciplined, stay central, perform the task that they've been given, and then help organize. I think that's what at least Dave Sargent is looking for. We'll see whomever the next U.S. national team coach is, what they're looking for.
So the one final thing I'll say as well is that I think a player like Acosta or McKennie or Adams is superior to, say, a Bradley or a Trapp. Because I feel like when we put Bradley or Trapp as the 6, we're thinking these guys are good at like putting their foot on the ball and spraying passes around and taking responsibility that way. You do lose that a little bit, right? You don't see Tyler Adams hit like 70-yard diagonal balls like Michael Bradley does. But I also don't think that's necessarily a good way for the US to be playing.
Yeah. I'm with you on that
done
one.
with having a quarterback at number 6. I want a more sort of rounded player.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I have thoughts on why they also might be superior to Bradley, but those we'll get to when we get to our very final question because it kind of connects.
Okay.
There we go. go.
I look forward to that.
In the meantime, we've got other questions to get to, starting with Jesse Frankles. What do you think about the USMNT calling in players for their first call-ups or from overseas to then not even have them dress at all? Aaron Long was called in for the first time for the September friendlies, including one in New York, where he plies his trade, to then not dress for either game. Andrija Novakovich was called in for the most recent friendlies and flew in from Europe to not dress for either the Colombia or Peru games, so for me, it's a little upsetting.
Okay, Jesse Frankel, singular.
Yep.
I understand that it's frustrating, right, to see a player called up, see them fly over, and then you don't see them on the field. My opinion is that what we see on the field is only the bit of the iceberg that's above the water.
Yep.
You with me on this?
I'm
Do you agree?
100% with you.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes on. If you are called up to the US national team, you are in camp, you are practicing every day, the coaches are getting to know you, you're getting to know your fellow players. I think time spent with the national team is still valuable both to the player himself and to the coaching staff and to just, if you're a fan of the program, for the program moving forward, even if you don't see them play. And I actually think Aaron Long is a really good example because he was called into the previous camp. We didn't see a minute, right?
Yep.
Then he gets to start the Peru game. And if he'd only been called in, if the coaching staff had thought, we won't call him in for these September games because we're not going to use him, we're just going to have him in practice, it's not really important, he would not have been as comfortable or in such a good position as he was to start in that game in October against Peru.
Yeah? I agree with you. But I also think that it's a weird thing to have to back up and realize that these rosters, especially for friendlies, aren't about who are the 23 best players that are going to give me the best chance of winning these two friendlies.
Yep.
Maybe that's 18 of those players, but some of those names in there are, we're not really familiar with him at senior level, or, he's just gotten this move, or he wasn't on our radar before.
Or literally, I've never met him.
Yeah.
What's this guy like? Is this a nice guy? Is this a guy who's poison when we bring him into camp?
Exactly.
That stuff is important as well. So you give people almost a test run of, do they come and steal everybody's shoes?
Yeah.
or do they come and they're a valuable member of the 23?
Yeah, exactly. So I think as long as that's the case, then I'm okay with it. And we were both frustrated to not see Kenny Saif get to dress for the second game. We would have liked to see him get some minutes and see if maybe that game against Colombia was an aberration or if that's the norm for him. Same thing for Novakovich, that we haven't seen him very much since that first game, and I would like to see more of what he brings to the team. But I'm going to say, in a good faith way, that I'm assuming that was calling him in to see what he's like, to see him get some minutes. But I would have much rather had Josh Sargent start the Peru game, of course.
He did the goal.
No, the only way he did the goal. The only way I think it's a bad thing is if you're calling these players in, but the only reason they're not getting minutes is because I've got my 17 guys. These are the people I'm going to play every single game. And then you're sort of just sticking with the status quo because I've coached them before. They know what I want. It's easier for me that way. Then suddenly you're just kind of building this core that maybe got a lot of reps, but that doesn't set you up if one of them gets injured or one of them has a downturn in form.
But are you suggesting this has happened?
No, I'm just saying that's the only time that it would be more frustrating for me, that if, say, a coach were brought in, I'm going to say, I won't even put it on you, we'll say former co-host Albert Otade gets hired, and he only plays the same 11.
Good choice, whoever made that.
I don't know.
Maybe not in this hypothetical scenario.
Not in this hypothetical scenario. If he's only ever calling in the same people, maybe he calls in the same 20 every time, and then there's 3 other names on there, those 3 never get any time. Then to me, that suddenly becomes here we go, he's calling in these 3, they're never playing, he's just going to play the same people. And it starts to feel like, he's just playing the people who are in his camp, who he likes, and not seeing what else fits.
That makes sense, because when it's just a personality thing and it's long-term and you're blocking the chances of other people, then it gets frustrating.
Yep.
I would say, Jesse, that he is thinking more about, especially these more experimental type friendlies, that it's frustrating to think, we're going to see more of the Novakovich experiments. But I didn't even see him play 1 second for the US national team.
Yeah, and there's also the case that it could very well be maybe sparing them some blushes. That, say, Novakovich, I'm not saying this is the case, we have no information saying this, but as an example, say he had a really bad camp. Say he was maybe nursing an injury, didn't play very well, was at full fitness by the time Peru came around, but it just felt like it wasn't going to be his night. It makes sense to me to not give them minutes if you don't want to risk destroying the ego and momentum of a young player.
Through injury or form or having a bad week or whatever it may be. Because I'd also say, just as fans who obviously we don't get to take in as much information as the coaching staff because they see the players in practice every day and all that, the absence of minutes for someone, it's not a complete vacuum of information. The information is the coaching staff has decided Novakovich doesn't need to see the field. We're going to stick with Wood and Sargent. Right? We can pretty confidently say that in the practice sessions before the Colombia game and before the Peru game, it's not as if Novakovich was playing lights out, banging in goals, and looking better than Wood and Sargent combined. Because if that had been the case, he wouldn't be starting. It's probably the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Maybe just looking at practice, it looked like, Wood and Sargent are the guys we've got to use.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, I mean, as long as that's the case, as long as it is you're calling people in to see how they fit, to see what they do, maybe Novakovich was just a scratch this last game, but then he comes back for the next camp and it works out fine. Same for Kenny Saif, same for many other folks.
Okay, lots more questions
Yes,
to come. But first, today's Total Soccer Show is sponsored by The Athletic. The Athletic, it's a website, it's an app, it's not just soccer.
It's an experience.
It's an experience. I always forget to promote this because I forget that other people like sports beyond soccer. It's great journalism about all kinds of sports in the United States.
I often forget that as well until I go to the Athletic homepage and I'm like, what's this football article doing here amongst all the soccer content?
What are all these egg-shaped balls?
Oh, right. And it's Superstition Week. Superstition Week is ongoing at The Athletic. Thank you. You never knock on wood. That's a first.
Only ironically. That was an ironic knock on wood.
Yeah, we are very different in that regard. And I enjoyed, there was a good article basically about how the U.S. women's national team does not have any superstitions.
Was it Caitlin Murray?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of, I felt like they were trying really hard to give her something. So like, I guess I used to do this. Or like little moments like that. But generally, it was just more, again, it goes back to the routine aspect of things.
Isn't the U.S. women's national team suspicion that they score in the first 2 minutes?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
They said, like, we'll settle down and feel better if we just score in the first 2 minutes. So we keep up that as a tradition.
Yes. Yeah.
What else is on there in Superstition Week? What else have you seen?
There was one by Paul Tenorio where he kind of went through a few more of like the U.S. national team superstitions throughout history.
Let's do this. We can't give them all away because then maybe people won't subscribe to The Athletic at theathletic.com/TSS October. But can you give maybe one away? What U.S. national team player or team superstition can we reveal?
Sure. I think people may remember when Chris Wondolowski had an extra W on his shirt.
Wondolowski.
There you go. Yeah. And it actually, like, not it did, but he had a very good game that day, and it led to maybe more W's being included on his jerseys at various points in various places.
Did they put them like where you couldn't see them?
I wish I could tell you, but I guess you'll have to read the article.
Yeah. I wonder if the Belgium game broke the streak.
We'll see. It did mention that Kyle Beckerman was like, "What's up, man? There's no W on here." So maybe that was the game.
Well, if you would like to subscribe to The Athletic, then first of all, good choice. Second of all, you can get 40% off an annual subscription if you go to theathletic.com/TSS October. Theathletic.com/TSS October. And here's my pitch is 1, you'll be getting like access to a lot of really good writing. 2, you'll be getting access to breaking news, right? Paul Tenorio breaks a lot of MLS and US national team news. Pablo Mara, I think, just broke news that there's going to be shirt sleeve sponsors on MLS jerseys next season. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff in there. 3, I've lost count, but I think 3, if you subscribe at The Athletic, don't you laugh at me, theathletic.com/TSS October, they'll know that you sent us, so we'll get the credit. So then maybe The Athletic buys more ads, and then Tyler and I make more money.
Yes.
Yeah?
I agree with most of what you said.
I will put the link in the show notes, theathletic.com/TSS October. All right, when you're done grinning, why don't you ask me the next question?
All right, I can do that. The next one comes from Scott Gleich, who asks, what are your thoughts on Liga MX, President Enrique Bonilla's statements about a combined Liga MX MLS league? Ooh, lots of letters in there. Via the Guardian article. Obviously, this may all be wild conjecture on his part, but assuming something like that ever happened, what would you look forward to, and how would you structure it? Ooh. Is it possible that such a league could be a net positive?
So we read this article, obviously, at the time. I've been waiting to talk about it, so I'm glad that Scott asked this question. A couple of other people did as well. I think it's worth at the start caveating this to say that this was Bonilla talking at something called the Leaders Sports Business Summit in London, and he wasn't saying, we're definitely working on this, this is happening, right? Because he also mentioned that this could maybe happen in the wake of the United 2026 World Cup. And that got interneted into a story that Liga MX and MLS are going to combine after 2026, right? Well, this snowball picked up a lot of snow.
There was a tweet by, I think, a journalist, I forget, who said, like, I can confirm that those conversations have happened. Mm-hmm. And I think that was second source. Suddenly this seems real. But those conversations could have been, hey, do you want to do that? No? Okay. That counts as a conversation.
Well, the somewhat reality basis for this is there is cooperation between MLS and Liga MX. It was kind of announced softly a little bit in March, right? And it's essentially they would share best practices and look at ways to work together, which I assume means like Soccer United Marketing is going to look at some stuff for us. And one of the results we have is the Campeones Cup, which you'll remember no one watched.
Or you just won't remember, one or the other.
Where Toronto lost to, I believe, Tigres. Yeah, so that's like one thing that happens where the MLS champion plays the Liga MX champion. Maybe more things will happen in the future, but I think it's just worth saying that it doesn't really look likely that this thing's going to happen anytime soon, but it is exciting to talk about.
To some extent.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's more exciting. Honestly, it's more exciting for you than me. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording. Because I think with these types of questions, my brain, maybe because I'm married to a lawyer, is very like, well, you'd have to do like so many, like you'd have to rewrite so many contracts and so many things would have to be changed. And this wouldn't work and this wouldn't function. How would you do with this? And I go into like the nitty gritty of it more than this would be a fun thought experiment of it all. So I'm going to try to do that here.
Yeah.
But I do think it would basically, like if somebody gave us all the power in the world and said, Daryl and Taylor, like, do what you guys want to make this happen, it would basically require a fundamental restructuring of U.S. soccer from like top to bottom in terms of the leagues.
Major League Soccer or U.S. Soccer?
All of, I mean, of like professional soccer, because I think basically you'd have to have pro rel, because I think that's how you would do it. Is basically the best teams in MLS would get promoted to this next tier league where you have teams from Mexico in there as well.
I think that depends how entwined the two structures want to be, right? If it's just like a playoff thing where the top few teams in MLS and the top few teams in Liga MX have a playoff to determine the champion, then you wouldn't necessarily need to have pro rel all the way down in American soccer to make that happen. So there are various ways that these things can converge, right? But if you're actually to just jam the two together, then maybe you'd have to do a lot more restructuring.
But see, I think but the one you're talking about, like, then when does that playoff happen? At the end of MLS's playoffs?
You would have
already?
to restructure the calendar, right? And for example, Liga MX then couldn't have an apertura and closera, or MLS would have to have an opening and closing, or an apertura.
It's almost like there are lots of obstacles to this happening.
All right, so logistics are hard.
Sure.
Distances are long, all that sort of stuff. Flights are expensive. But if we were going to do it, if we're going to find a way for something better than the Campeones Cup, where just the champion plays the champion and no one really cares, if we were to make it a really legitimate intertwining of the leagues in some way, what exactly would we like it to look like?
I wasn't joking, though. Like, I think restructuring it, that is my answer.
Okay.
Because I think what you would have to do, basically, is create a sort of league unto itself, like the Champions Division or something, where you have the best teams in Mexico competing against like American teams, and American teams competing against American teams, and Mexican teams competing against Mexican teams. And it just becomes an international league, basically.
So I've got some like ideas scratched around here. So this would be maybe MLS still exists, Liga MX still exists, but when you finish high in those leagues, then next season maybe you go into this next tier league of like the best 9 MLS, the best 9 Liga MX. You've got an 18-team league that then plays a whole season.
Yeah, and then I think basically what you'd have to do is
some sort of Super League, Superliga.
Yeah, right? You'd have to stock it, but then I think you could just do a simple thing of maybe at the end of every season, the worst 2 finishing MLS teams get relegated, the best 2 from like the MLS domestic get promoted back up. Same thing for Liga MX.
It's interesting, right?
So then you've got the kind of swap in, swap out.
So I would watch that. I would watch Monterrey versus New York Red Bulls.
Yeah, of course.
With points on the line.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I mean, but then that's where I was going back to. But then suddenly you maybe don't have enough MLS teams, so that you either have to have a bunch
more
of expansion.
That'd be good news for Sacramento.
Or you like do a pro rel thing where then you can kind of stock the ponds that much more readily because you've got existing structure in place.
I mean, if this is possible to make this happen, I think I'd be into it. I think it would be really exciting. Because then the knock-on benefits, the reason Bonilla even suggested this at like a sports business forum is you just have a bigger market, right? Suddenly, because Liga MX is already the most watched soccer league in the United States, right? I believe that the average viewership, I don't know exactly, but it's around 1 million. It's slightly better than the Premier League, slightly better than the Champions League, a lot better than Major League Soccer. So that'd be good news for MLS to join forces with what's actually the most popular league in this country. Yeah. And for then Liga MX, they expand even more into the United States.
Yeah.
I would argue if MLS is at a standard where it's confident it can compete with Liga MX,
it's a big if. Yep.
Then it provides a lot more competition and a lot more drama and a lot more interest.
Yeah, because if you had like a 12-team league at the top and it was teams 1 through 6 were all from Liga MX and then teams 7 through 12 were all from MLS.
Yeah.
That doesn't look so good.
It would look bad, right?
Yeah.
If the sorting of the league was just Mexican at the top and US at the bottom.
And that's where my head goes back to. I feel like what you suggested more as
What did I suggest?
After the season's over, the 2 best teams or 3 best teams go into some weird round robin playoff. Like the next season as a weird the Super Cup in Europe or something like that, where you've got the Europa League winner playing the Champions League winner. It feels a little bit like that, as more of a slightly meaningful exhibition game. So that's one aspect. Then the other thing that I think you and I kind of brainstormed on the fly was that maybe what you could do is eliminate playoffs from Major League Soccer, and instead you really do Supporter Shield. You have one MLS for that season, but then the 8 best teams in the standings go into a postseason competition that also includes 8 teams from Mexico.
Yes, so the playoffs, no domestic playoffs in the way that we think of it now. The playoffs are cross-border, including Canada as well, obviously. And then maybe just a random draw of the best 16, best 8 from MLS, best 8 from Liga MX. And then you are crowned the champion of whatever we are going to call this league. The North American Primera League?
You know I have issues with calling it North America.
Okay, yeah.
Because
we don't need to debate the geography of what's where.
I'm just saying the idea of creating like a North American Cup, it's like, that's called the CONCACAF Champions League.
But
just throwing that out there.
CONCACAF includes like Caribbean and Central America.
Sure.
I think North America is a separate region, but we don't need to debate this on the show. People will tweet to tell you that.
How many continents are there on the planet?
I don't know. That's up for debate as well.
Okay.
There's one, and it's Pangaea, and we're just temporarily separated.
Yeah.
Till it all comes back around. Okay. Any other thoughts on this? By the way, I was going to call it the Continental League and have it sponsored by Continental Tires.
There you go. Perfect.
Because Soccer United Marketing already has the contacts. Right?
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they've already got the branding and merchandise in place.
Any other thoughts on this, Taylor?
No, I'm good. I'm good. I think we've discussed it. I feel confident with my possible solutions that I don't know if ever going to come to fruition, but if they do, I would like some sort of remuneration.
Let me ask you this: would, for example, the US men's national team, and by that I mean the production of American talent, be improved or threatened by this combining of leagues?
Maybe both. I mean, one doesn't have to mean the other. I mean, you could then...
Are you telling me things can be two things?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, but in this hypothetical world, you're basically kind of forcing me to choose one or the other, and I'm choosing neither. Okay. Because I would say that maybe you get younger players playing at a higher level because maybe George Bello has to start for Atlanta in that next level competition against Liga MX teams, and you've got to kind of improve your standing that way.
Tougher competition for him. Yeah.
But it also might mean, fewer minutes because you're trying to compete to make it to that next tier top level.
Because then Atlanta just signed some other more expensive left back for this tougher competition.
Because I do think you'd have to then, if you're going to financially compete as an MLS franchise, you have to get rid of some of the salary cap restrictions and the spending restrictions so that you can compete with Liga MX teams. And then you can spend more. That might mean less youth development as a result.
Good point. I think one thing worth noting is the reason that, I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name, is it Benio, suggested that they might want to do this. And again, it's just him blue sky thinking at a business forum, is that essentially he sees Europe running away with all the money and that this would be a way for leagues that are smaller than the Premier League and the Champions League and all that to be able to try and compete. So it's like an idea of sticking together to make your market bigger to try and compete with the big things over in Europe.
Yeah. I will say this. You keep going back to like the blue sky thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, he's Liga MX president. Like he knows.
Oh, you're right, yeah.
He knows
he's angling.
He knows that his comments are in a public sphere, and even if they're just asked on the fly. If you asked Sunil Gulati or Don Garber, then I guarantee you they wouldn't be, or Carlos Cadero, obviously, they wouldn't be like, well, let me think about that and give you some like pontificating answers. They would say like, I have no thoughts on that, or like, that's not happening. It doesn't matter, because they wouldn't want that soundbite taken out of context. That we have that quote, I feel like it's more.
You think he knew it would be a big story and people would be talking about it a lot?
And I think if you read that Guardian article again, more of the narrative is about how big Liga MX is, how it's kind of doing better than MLS in the United States, how they're evolving all of their technology to make it even more accessible, how American males ages 18 to 44 are watching more Liga MX than ever. Like, I think that was the key part of it, is kind of promoting his league by making it look very good and very strong. And hey, MLS wants to be a part of this and will approach negotiations from a very strong position, is I believe a rough quote of what he said.
Roughly in there. Yeah. Okay, I'll link to the Guardian article for people to read if they like. They can click it in the show notes. One other thing worth noting is if we're thinking about MLS having access to other competitions, there was also I don't know if it's a rumour or a report, but I'm bold enough to repeat it, that MLS was looking at maybe asking for permission to enter the Copa Libertadores, which is the South American Champions League type competition that Mexican teams already compete in. It would make sense if MLS is starting to feel like, hey, we're ready for this to enter the Libertadores.
Yep.
I'd maybe win the CONCACAF Champions League first, if possible. But
how about one of the other cup competitions that no MLS franchise takes that seriously?
Yeah, let's do.
Can we focus on one of those first?
Let's win one of those first,
right.
But then let's get into it. But even actually, if I was offered, would you like MLS in Libertadores next year? Yes or no? I'm going to say yes because I want to see Atlanta United versus Boca Juniors.
All right.
Why not? I'd watch that.
I would certainly watch that. I would certainly watch that.
Are you ready for another question?
Let's do it.
This question is from Phil Kennedy. Phil Kennedy asks, or says, a while ago, you had a question about how various national teams would do in the Premier League. I think we did England, France, maybe Brazil. The one team you never brought up that I thought Phil thinks could win the Premier League is Belgium. So Phil's question is, how do you think Belgium would do in the Premier League in a scenario where star players like Hazard, Lukaku, De Bruyne move away from their current clubs and play for a Belgian national team in the Premier League? What would happen, Taylor?
I think they definitely would have the talent that if you had some weird every club is told your best players are going to go play for their national team who are also playing in the Premier League. They would definitely have the strength and the star players and the name recognition to do well. I think they're not going to win the Premier League, though, in my opinion. And there are a couple reasons why.
Well, before you mention those, let me first make the case that I think they would have a shot at winning the Premier League in their first season in the Premier League because of that removal of players from the other teams. The destabilisation of Manchester City, who would lose Kevin De Bruyne and Vincent Kompany. The destabilisation of Spurs, who would lose both their centre-backs.
Kind of a big deal.
Although Cameron Carter-Vickers would rocket up the depth chart and probably be starting in the Premier League, which is probably not great for Spurs.
He's not even starting for Swansea. So.
Right, he's not as good as Alvaro Vertonghen, right? Chelsea would lose Eden Hazard. I know they have a lot of other good players, but a lot revolves around Eden Hazard. Manchester United, despite their current struggles, would be struggling even more, I would argue, without Romelu Lukaku, right? So all those teams would get destabilised. I think first year would be the year for Belgium to try and win the Premier League. After that, I think they might start struggling. And I haven't quite written down a list of reasons why. It's more of an instinctive feeling that maybe Thomas Meunier isn't quite Premier League winning quality. What are the problems you see?
I mean, that's a big one. To start off where you were, is fullback depth. I mean, we talked about that in regards to the World Cup, that we had concerns about who was playing fullback. They had Carrasco playing as a left fullback at one point, or left wingback.
It's a bit stopgap.
It's not what he does, and he made that abundantly clear. So I think you're going to have some depth issues in certain spots. The biggest one for me is one that it's tough to overlook. I mean, Roberto Martinez has had Premier League gigs. He was relegated in one and fired from the other. He doesn't have the best reputation or the best managerial resume when it comes to a team that's supposed to be challenging or doing well in the Premier League. And I do wonder if it works at international level because you're only together for 1 week a month every now and then. It's a little national guardy. But when you're together all the time, would some of his flaws or character traits become more frustrating for the team? And that's the thing that I think you can't experience until you're in a locker room day in, day out, every day.
I would say Martinez's defence, this would be the best team he's ever coached in the Premier League. Right?
Yeah.
With all respect to his Everton teams that were pretty good, this Belgian team has a lot more talent than his Everton team.
Yes.
They both have Romelu Lukaku. They don't both have Kevin De Bruyne.
This is true. So but again, worth remembering that he got this job because the Belgian FA doesn't have much money. And so he was a manager that they could afford, that they could get.
Agreed.
Not, here's this coup that we're landing this person who's going to lead us to Premier League glory.
It's not Guardiola, right?
But I really do think that would be one of the biggest question marks I would have. I'm not saying he would definitely get it wrong. I think he had a very good first season with Everton. There was a point when I as a Man United fan was like, ooh, maybe we should have gone for him and not David Moyes.
Yeah, managers' reputations are very up and down. It's a lot of peaks and valleys, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the numbers game has a whole, the whole first chapter is about how he's this brilliant manager who's figured it all out. It's that doesn't really hold true anymore. I think we had the same idea of Gary Monk at Swansea. For
almost as if everyone's overreacting multiple times.
What? No. But I think that would be a limitation. Outside of that, though, I think there's a chance that maybe the funness of having your national team competing at that level, and maybe it would overlook some character issues, and maybe you'd find some stopgap measures, and suddenly maybe they do in the Premier League that first year. But I think it would be a very tight race.
So Premier League viewership would definitely go up in Belgium.
I would say so.
I'm sure it's already reasonably high, but like, imagine how committed people are when they watch the national team. We stay here till crazy hours to watch the national team. People would be watching. All of Belgium would be watching every Saturday.
I also that's the thing is I like the idea that like their squad is actually just the entire national team pool.
Yeah.
So that like one random
100 people have to turn up for every game.
Well, it's just it's more like one left back who's like 18 scores 3 goals in Ligue 1 for Monaco, and they're just like, yeah, we'll have some of that. You're starting against Chelsea this weekend.
Luckily, you won't have to mark Eden Hazard. He'll be on your side.
Exactly. But he will not be helping you, Mark.
Okay, we have one final question to come, which I'm excited to answer. But first, today's show is sponsored by one of our faves, Away Days. AwayDaysFootball.com is an independent soccer clothing brand based out of Boston. They are the purveyors of the marvelous mystery kits.
I'm going to say the addictive mystery kits, because I feel like more often than not, we get somebody tweeting and saying or messaging and saying like, hey, I got one, it was so cool. And we then get, hey, I got another one. It was very cool.
Yep.
We had Mr. Front Page on Twitter tweet today to let us know.
It's a good Twitter name.
It is. He had gotten 6 mystery kits. It was a good haul.
All at the same time?
I think he got like some for like kids as gifts, and then a few more. But there were some good ones in there. He got Swansea. I'll take that one.
Yeah.
Nottingham Forest in there. Besiktas, Nuremberg, AIK or Ike. And I think I spotted River Plate in there. So some solid jerseys all around.
And if you're this is your first time hearing an Away Days ad, the deal is you get the mystery kit, and it's basically guaranteed not to be an obvious team, right? It's not going to be Arsenal, Man United, Real Madrid, Barcelona, anything like that. It's going to be a little bit hipstery, and that's the joy of it, right? It can be from anywhere in the world and any division.
Yep, and I love it just because anywhere in the world, that team has history and has a story, and you can always find different stuff about, Johan Cruyff played there for 4 games when he was 13 years old. What? And like it helps you sort of get a weird... I forget what the term is.
He was 13 years old.
I don't know, whatever. He probably could have done it. He was smoking at the time. So just look for the 13-year-old blonde kid who's smoking on the field and looks a little too arrogant. And that was probably Johan Cruyff. But it's like, it lets you sort of learn all these little bits of trivia about a club because you go researching what is it about AIK? What do they offer? And then suddenly you learn all about the history of, Greek politics, because I guess politics coincide with soccer in Greece.
And the rest of the world.
There you go.
Yeah. The other great thing about mystery kits is they're only $25.
Also that.
$25 each. You can also get a gift subscription of 3 months for mystery kits that will just arrive at someone else's house.
There you go.
I guess that's a nice gesture, but I'd buy them for myself.
You should probably tell them it's coming, so they don't just get random boxes of like random jerseys. What is happening?
What is happening?
Yes.
Also worth remembering, I know the mystery kits are very popular, but Away Days is also an entire line of clothing. T-shirts, hoodies, sweaters, hats, all of that good stuff is available at awaydaysfootball.com. Go to the website, take a good look.
I have their thank you for buying our Away Days apparel card like taped to my fridge because it's just a well-designed card. It's nice. They got good graphics.
It's a card that comes with it.
Yes.
Yeah. It's very nicely packaged and boxed.
Yep.
Really good attention to detail, especially for a good indie brand. Yeah, this isn't some big company. This is an indie soccer clothing brand.
It is indeed.
Awaydaysfootball.com. You can get 15% off your purchase, whether it's a mystery kit or anything else, if you use the discount code TSS at awaydaysfootball.com. TSS, 15% off at awaydaysfootball.com.
All right, final question on today's episode comes from Eric K. Given the fact that the men's national team has been in a shambles and the women's national team is a well-oiled machine, should Jill Ellis be considered for coach of the men's team? Bigger picture, are there lessons the men's team can learn from the women's team? Daryl, before you answer, I have another question for you. Genuine question. Is it they are a shambles or they are shambles?
I would say they are a shambles.
See, I think you're
George
right.
Cruyff would say the team is a shambles.
See, okay, I feel like that is the proper usage, and then it gets sort of like morphed over time into maybe a more Americanized, because I feel like I would say like, oh, he's shambles, but I would never say he's a shambles.
I guess the correct thing is to say they are shambolic.
That's even better. Right. All right, let's stick with shambolic. Yeah. So the U.S. men's team has been shambolic. The women's team has been the opposite of that. So should Jill Ellis be considered for the U.S. men's job? And are there lessons that the men can learn from the women's team?
Okay, to the first part, should Jill Ellis be considered for the men's job? I think the answer is no. First of all, she's got a job that she's doing very well at the moment, and there's a World Cup coming next year.
Also
so
that.
Let's let her keep doing that. I actually think in the longer version of this question, Eric did address that.
Yeah.
So, but I want to make sure to say that. Second thing is that men's and women's soccer, it's two different worlds, right? We don't know how much Jill Ellis knows about the men's national team pool, right? She's an expert with the women's national team pool, even though she somehow overlooked Adriana Franch.
Yeah.
She has a deep knowledge of women's soccer. She may not have the same deep knowledge of men's soccer, right?
And I would extend that to Lauren Hutchinson, who is a defender for the Trinidad and Tobago national team. I think she is from Tobago, so I don't want to say Trinidad. She was on the Cooligans podcast recently talking about some of the inequality when it comes to the Trinidad and Tobago Federation.
Yes.
But I had a conversation with her a while back about men's and women's soccer, and she was saying that like she doesn't like it when a coach from the men's side presumes they could manage the women's side,
yes,
and vice versa, because they're very different games. So you're right about the player pool, but it's also the case that you're coaching different people from a size, speed, physicality, everything that comes with coaching men versus coaching women. It's very different, and it makes it a very different game. And so to assume that, this coach is very good, so they'd be very good over here, or vice versa, I don't think it works that way.
Okay, yeah, I am 100% with you on that. So that's why I don't think JLS is a serious consideration for the men's national team job. On a similar note, there's an interesting, I would say, unpopular experiment happening in England where Phil Neville, who has no knowledge of women's soccer, was made the England women's national team coach, the Lionesses coach. I feel very uncomfortable about that because it's presuming that Phil Neville will know enough to make that work. I guess we'll see how that plays out in 2019.
Yeah, because I don't know in terms of him getting his coaching badges and certifications if he has been really focused on developing the women's game, learning how to coach women's soccer, how to effectively coach women's soccer, or if it was just the case that he got his coaching badges and then was like, sure, I'll interview for that job. And in that case, I think that was what Lauren was talking about, of just this sort of like, I know the men's game, so I'll know the women's game too. You don't. And you're probably going to get it wrong because it's really different, and the way you're going to play and the way you're going to set up is going to be fundamentally different.
And to be very clear, that doesn't mean that if you're a man, you can't know the women's game, right?
Oh, no,
there are
not at all.
Successful,
Tony DiCicco.
Tony DiCicco. You just have to know that side of the game.
Yeah.
Okay, to the second part of the question, are there lessons the men's team can learn from the women's team? Am I going to answer, or are you?
I'll go here because this is one where I said in the very beginning that, like, when you talked about that maybe these players that in Tyler Adams, Weston McKinney, Kellen Acosta are a little bit superior to Michael Bradley. I would say one thing that I think I prefer about those younger guys is I get more of a sense of camaraderie for them. And I think if you look at the women's team, that's a big one for me, is they seem to have consistently better chemistry and camaraderie. And I think that was really driven home for me, not just in social media and that they're always in each other's weddings and posting photos together even when they're on different teams, but stuff like last night we talked about with the way they pressed and how as soon as Alex Morgan started moving forward when that ball went backward, everybody moved together and everybody ran. And it was 40-yard sprints from Tobin Heath, and then she would turn and there was another opportunity and she sprinted 40 yards. And it was that level of work that I think certainly comes with success, but it also comes with belief within the team and that kind of strong vibe of I'm doing this for my teammates, so I got to work that much harder.
Yeah.
And I feel like that comes from being connected and being a little bit goofier and maybe being a little bit more vulnerable than I think the men's team. There is this idea of locker room is a vault and we don't talk about anything and people don't need to know what's going on. And my social media
there
posts.
Wasn't a lot of acting silly either, was there? I think there is more with the younger generation of the men's team.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
The previous generation, we never really saw them like messing around so much.
Yeah, and I think maybe there's an element of...
I wanted them to splash through that water in Trinidad, not have a coach carry them.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that there's a weird element of like Alexi.
Sorry, that's a dumb example. But you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Actually, I think it's a perfect example because the difference would be that like Alexi Lalas's generation, like the '94 team, maybe even the '98 team, like they're still trying to prove themselves. They're still trying to get to that level. But with that comes like, but who's really paying attention to us? Like we'll stomp through the puddles and we'll wear goofy shoes and I'll play guitar while I do it and no one's going to care. But you're not going to see that next generation or the generation that comes after. Like in the 2002, 2006, 2010 of we can be goofy. These are the people who are going to be wearing ties and have the big headphones, and we're all very serious because soccer is a very serious sport and it has to be taken very seriously, and we all have very furrowed brows and we talk about it seriously and choose our words very wisely because they're going to be taken out of context and suddenly we're in trouble. And I think that there is something to be said for those young players coming through who comment on each other's Instagrams and make fun of each other via social media and play FIFA online together. And like that, I'm not saying that Josie Altidore doesn't play FIFA with Michael Bradley, but I am saying that we don't hear them talk about it. We hear the younger players talk about it, and we see how being that well bonded with the women's team helps them, I think, perform better. And I think that's a big lesson the U.S. men could learn.
Interesting. One angle I would add
Sorry
to this,
for the ranting monologue.
No, I think this is really interesting. One angle I would add is the thing that I think maybe the US women's national team over the last few years and, say, the men's national team that was like, punching up a lot, like the Lalas Winalda era, that in some ways they were sort of united in defiance against the federation.
Yeah.
That they had a sort of common enemy, that they were like unhappy about bonuses or the women's team being unhappy about having to play on turf fields, which seems they've won that war, by the way. That has been happening less and less. And I always feel with the men's team, there maybe just isn't that like, all right, the man's sticking it to us, but we're gonna stick together and we're gonna make something happen.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
I mean, because like again, to connect the two, like the was it the Copa America team when all there was like Paesa were not playing?
Yeah,
like and everybody backed that decision, and I have that exactly in my notes. It gives you more unity, and therefore it gives you more power because you can say like, no, we're not doing this, and all of us aren't going along with it. And I think that forges you together this bond of unity that if you don't really have an outside force that forces you to rally outside of you want to win a game. Maybe that's not that next level motivation you need. And
speaking of next level, I think is the hardest thing about the men's team learning lessons from the women's team is it is just the case that the women's team is either the best in the world or among the best in the world because of all the things that happened in women's soccer in the United States, Title IX and the early advantage that the women's national team got over other women's national teams that did not have as much infrastructure and all that kind of stuff in the early days, right? Whereas the men's team are really sort of middle of the pack and they need to find a way to punch above their weight. The women's team, you're talking about some of the best players in the world. It's really hard to say like, I wish the men's team had the same winning mentality or whatever as the women's team when they're just a superior quality player versus their opposition contrasted to the men's team who are not.
Yeah. And taking that one step further, I'm going to go with a potentially outdated Friends reference, but like to the
There's
Jill...
no such thing.
There we go.
It's an oxymoron.
To the Jill Ellis question, like there's like the episode where they're all playing each other in football and like Joey's team is winning and then he has to switch teams and he goes from being up by three touchdowns to down by 3 touchdowns and he says like, I was just up by that amount. And I feel like that would be Jill Ellis. I'm like, I just won the World Cup. Like what? we're doing what now?
Now I'm not even qualified.
Yeah, exactly.
We normally qualify easily.
Hold on. Yeah, that wouldn't be the most fun.
I mean, and that's another argument if you're going to have a list of arguments of why Jill Ellis shouldn't take the men's national team job. It's because she'd be working with a team that's at a lower FIFA ranking than the one she was used to.
Yeah. All right. There we go. But I've taken it into like a social media like locker room atmosphere culture one. Do you have any that are more like on the field?
I mean, they're not exactly lessons because I think all of this is overshadowed by the idea that the women's team have the higher FIFA ranking and superior talent than the men's team versus their opposition. But there are maybe trends that have happened with the women's national team that I'd like to see somehow repeated, if possible, with the men's national team. One example I would say is the adjustment and or phasing out of older players. The way that's been handled on the women's team, I've been really impressed by in recent years. Give you an example, Abby Wambach, best striker for a long, long time. 2015 World Cup, she started some, she came off the bench some, Alex Morgan started some. There was a very good sort of, all right, you're the star striker, but you're towards the end of your career. These are your last few games, probably. We're not going to start you every game. There's a good use of the older player.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Same with Carli Lloyd now.
That's
Carli
what I was going to say,
team. She's the hat-trick scoring, World Cup winning former captain. Now she's like the midfielder you bring on in the second half.
And I think it was
or the reserve striker behind Alex Morgan.
Yeah. I think it was John D. Halloran in your interview said like she's as okay with that role as Carli Lloyd is going to be.
Yeah, but she's okay
still
enough
doing
that
it,
she's still a happy part of the squad. And you always got the sense that like when Clint Dempsey was doing it, he wasn't fully happy about it. And he also, I think maybe when Rooney was doing that, he didn't necessarily do it at the right times.
Yeah.
Like in hindsight, Dempsey should have started in Trinidad, for example. So it wasn't quite handled correctly or fully in a way that got the best out of everybody.
Yeah.
There we go. So I think a more holistic approach to phasing out older players.
And I think, and I would add, there's more stress when it comes to phasing out like older veteran players with the women's team because of all of the like salary that goes with that decision.
Yes.
And
it's
so
harder, right?
Yeah, and so I think that is a very pressurized thing that you have to navigate very well if you're U.S. Soccer, the U.S. Soccer coach, or whomever's in charge of that decision. I think that is something that we could learn a little bit more from of how to treat players with a little bit of respect. Then again, I think the women's team would say that they probably still don't get nearly as much respect, and that's probably true.
Another thing also, you mentioned the organised press. I would just love to see the US men play with the
fun.
type of defensive organisation that the US women do. One thing that we saw against Peru was designed set pieces. US women have always had great designed set pieces that really often fool the opposition. The one that we pulled against Peru, where everybody pulled away and left Josh Sargent to receive that ball and strike, more of that, please, from the US men. It's so much better than just crossing the ball into the box and crossing your fingers.
Yeah. And in fact, I thought they were going to run that play against Canada, the U.S. women's team, because it looked like Julia Ertz called a bunch of people together in a box on a free kick, and it seemed like everybody was making that run, but I think it was one that ended up being an overhit cross. But everybody did clear out for one player to be open in the middle of the box.
Here's a big trend I've seen with the women. I would love to see with the men. I don't think we ever get it, is choosing a formation through rigorous experimentation. By which I mean there was a spell for the US women where Jill Ellis says, all right, we're playing three at the back. And they played three at the back for a good stretch of games. And it wasn't just try it once, try something else. Now next time we try something else. They really said, okay, we're trying this. We're going to work on this for a little bit and we'll see how it goes. And I feel like if you think of it as a science experiment, you basically get more data by repeating it, maybe with a few little variables of changing players around. But then by the end, you know, okay, this doesn't work, right? And in the end, what the US ended up doing was going with the 4-3-3, with Julia Ertz as the defensive midfielder, Alex Morgan as the target striker, two wide players off of Alex Morgan. That seems to be what we've experimented around, and then that was the successful experiment. That seems like it's going to be the shape for at least the next year, including the World Cup. We don't see that with the men, right? The formation is like, we just take our best guess at what they're going to do each time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a set formation.
Yeah, that totally with you, but that also I think goes back to the question we had from Jesse Frankel about when players don't get caps when they're called into camp. I think that can be part of it too, that if the U.S. is trying some different things in practice, the men's team, and maybe Dave Sargent this time thought, Novakovich is really good if we're going to go with like two just out-and-out strikers. But we're not going to do that here, so I'm not going to give him that time.
Yeah.
That is another thing.
Like, he doesn't have enough pace to play the single striker.
Exactly. So it doesn't make sense to try him here, but we're definitely going to keep calling him in until we play a system. That may have been the case with Aaron Long as well. He doesn't really fit what we're doing in this game, but he does here. So thank you for that reminder. I wanted to bring that up earlier, but I forgot. So yeah. Anyway, but going back to it, yes, I think an organized system of play where we know exactly what's going to happen. I mean, if you go back to the 2015 World Cup, we pretty much could pick the U.S.'s starting 11 almost every single game, except for when they would rest their entire team for one of those games. But generally speaking, I feel like that's something that you know going into the games. That was definitely not the case for the U.S. under maybe specifically Jurgen Klinsmann.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. Okay, anything else to add on this? I think if not, we're ready to wrap up the listener question segment of the show.
I think we're ready to wrap up the listener question segment of the show.
It's also worth noting, next week we have not quite vacation, but I know you've got family coming into town. I'm going away to a wedding for a few days. We're not going to not release shows. We wouldn't do that to you, but we are going to pre-record a lot of listener question shows. So get your questions in. We're going to answer a lot of listener questions next week.
All right.
TotalSoccerShow.com/questions for all your soccer questions. But we're also going to do an extra special show where we answer personal questions.
Oh boy.
So we have occasional questions that are about like how we record the show or stuff about us personally. We don't want to inflict it on people in the middle of a show because it feels a bit self-indulgent. We're going to do one self-indulgent show where we'll answer every question about ourselves, like our lives, what we do, how we record the show, a little bit behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff.
I'm not going to quite promise that level of openness.
Well, I mean, we'll choose the questions, right? If there's anything that's too personal, we just won't answer
what's
it.
your perfect date?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
No, I'm good on that.
With my wife. So if you've got like an Ask Us Anything type Total Soccer Show question, TotalSoccerShow.com/ask. TotalSoccerShow.com/ask. That show should be publishing next week.
All right.
Final thing today.
But before we get to all of that, we've got to do today's scouting updates, starting with Christian.
We get to do today's scouting updates.
Starting with Christian Gepinho, scouting Russell Canouse, the American defensive midfielder for DC United. Russell Canouse's hilarious pinball goal in the 86th minute versus Dallas has pushed the door wide open for DC to make the playoffs. As a New York supporter, this was especially painful for Christian to watch. Thus, Christian hereby requests a new scoutee, please.
Okay, next time I do scouting updates, I will find Christian Geppert, a scout who does not play for New York Red Bulls' bitter rivals.
Yeah, that's one of those where I think it began with him saying, I'd like a young American playing in Germany. Mm-hmm. That was what was happening.
That's what Canals was at the time.
The only one that's worse, was it Steve Renard who said, forgive me who it was, who said, I do not like Man United. Please don't give me a Man United player. Yeah. I'd prefer a young, up-and-coming, maybe French player. And we
found him someone at Monaco.
Yeah, we gave him Anthony Martial, and he signed for United 2 weeks later. That was up there for worst timing, I think.
Ryan Mark is scouting Alfonso Ocampo-Chavez, the 16-year-old American forward for Seattle Sounders too. Mm-hmm. Ryan says Ocampo-Chavez scored in the US Under-17's comeback win over Brazil on Sunday in a weird little tourney in England. Mm-hmm. The US was down 2-0 before coming back to win 3-2. Alfonso scored one of the three.
There we go. Mike Spinelli scouting George Bello, the 16-year-old American left back for Atlanta United. In that same tournament, which England won, Brazil finished third, Russia finished fourth, Bello found the back of the net in the 86th minute with a lovely free kick to push the USA past Russia in their final match, which was a 2-1 victory. Well done, George Bello.
So I've seen this goal. Mm-hmm. These weren't televised, but I can't remember where this game was played. It was like a small English ground. There was a fan with his phone. Or her phone, I'm not sure, filmed this goal from George Bello. Yeah, stepped up, bent the free kick in. Yeah.
I was about to try to take a shot at Wolves until I remember that your stadium seats 30,000, I think.
It's
doing all right. Yes, it's doing all right.
It does. Almost half as many as Manchester United. Mark Bajarski is scouting.
Yeah, you're not about to be owned by the Saudis, so
Cody Sundquist, the 19-year-old American midfielder for UCLA. Cody Sundquist scored the dramatic overtime winner for UCLA against San Diego State this past Saturday, says Mark. The game was tied going into the 87th minute, and the freshman midfielder came on and netted the winner in overtime, thereby giving the Bruins a 2-1 win. After the match, coach Jorge Salcedo stated, "It was a great goal and really fitting because Sundquist has been such a good player for our team. He's been a really fantastic addition to our program."
Hey, Daryl.
Yeah.
So have you. You've been a fantastic...
To UCLA?
To this program, my friend. To this program. Brian Hoysa scouting Serginho Dest, the 17-year-old American right-sider for Ajax.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, he's all over that right side. Serginho Dest had an eventful international break with Ajax. He made his debut for young Ajax, starting in their 2-1 loss to young PSV, and was partially responsible for both goals they conceded. I think one time he lost his man, the goalkeeper had to come out, conceded a penalty. Then I think he was too aggressive in a tackle and left some space behind. Mm-hmm. But in better news, he also made his first team debut, starting in a friendly against PEC's Volley, which Ajax won 4-1.
I'm going to guess that's pronounced Pex Volley.
Sure.
That? Why not? Steven Spica is scouting Shandon Hopeyu, the 19-year-old American forward for Seattle Sounders 2. Shandon Hopeyu has extended his relationship with S2 and announced he has re-signed for the 2019 USL season. He will join a list of 11 other Sounders Academy products that all have professional contracts with S2. Interesting things happening at S2.
Mm-hmm. Interesting things happening. Whew. Tough to say. For Sporting KC, Alex Tremel scouting Gianluca Busio, the 16-year-old American midfielder for Sporting KC. Gianluca Busio scored his first MLS goal in a 4-1 victory over the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Busio's a TSS fave.
After Johnny Russell did most of the work, Busio made a smart far post run and took the gentlest of touches a few feet from an open goal to roll the ball over the line. With that goal, Bello became the second youngest. Busio became the second youngest goal scorer in MLS history.
So, have you seen Ike Opara's tweet?
No.
So, after Busio scores, the night of, he just tweets, really happy to score my first goal, and he does the bicep emoji. Ike Opara, his Sporting KC teammate, quote tweeted it and said, congratulations, but there's way too much muscle on that arm emoji for you.
I love Ike Opara.
Because he's a skinny teenager.
I love that man so much.
Opara's hilarious.
Yeah, he is.
Will Herson is scouting, I thought you'd enjoy that, is scouting Ryan Sessegnon, the 18-year-old English left-sider for Fulham. We got a lot of just siders. Mm-hmm. Will Herson scouting Ryan Sessegnon. It was a dreadful month for Fulham and Sess. Sess has been deployed as a left-back in a 4-3-3, a left wing-back in a 3-4-3, and a left mid in A 4-4-2, excuse me. Cess still gets up the wing, dusts defenders and creates chances, but no goals this month, and Fulham are perilously close to the relegation zone. To end on a positive, Cess was recently nominated as the BBC Young Sports Personality of the Year, despite all the Twitter evidence that he has no personality whatsoever.
Ouch.
Ooh, shots fired, Will Hudson.
I don't know if that was meant to be that he doesn't update Twitter very often, or just that when he does, it's very James Milner-esque. Axel Romain scouting Nathaniel Chalobah, the 23-year-old English defensive midfielder for Watford.
At least one of them is firing shots.
Yeah. Nathaniel got his first national team cap in the 3-2 win over Spain on Monday. Daryl's new favourite player was subbed on in the second half stoppage time and is now cap-tied to England.
Yeah, go on. He's my new favourite player. Let's say that. Jeff Markman is scouting everyone who played for England against Spain is my new favourite player. Jeff Markman is scouting Reece Nelson.
And also Gianluca Busio.
Yeah, the 18-year-old English midfielder on loan at Hoffenheim from Arsenal, Reece Nelson. Jeff says Nelson scored a stoppage-time goal in his debut as a 72nd-minute sub in the under-21 England win, which is a 7-0 victory over Andorra. He's my new favourite player as well.
The England U21 win, yep.
That's the one. Mm-hmm. Nelson weaved his way through a trio of defenders before initiating a 1-2 that he finished with a showy backheel. Love him. He scored again in his second appearance, this time with a superb free kick against Scotland that gave England the lead. This win helped England qualify for the 2019 European Championships.
All right.
Did you hear who he beat with the free kick?
Who's that?
Scotland.
There you go. I'll let you say it one more time. Julie Nishimura-Jensen scouting Alen Halilovic, the 21-year-old Croatian midfielder for AC Milan, who play this weekend. The less said about Halilovic at AC Milan, the better. He's only played a few minutes, and rumors say he will be moving in January. Happier news, though, from the U21 European qualifiers, where Halilovic captained the Croatian team to the top of their group and qualification with a 4-0 win over San Marino. Halilovic scored the first goal in that game.
I still believe in Alen Halilovic.
All right.
I still believe. Guy Jedwab is scouting Serge Gnabry, the 23-year-old German wide forward for Bayern Munich. Guy says Serge Gnabry was a late addition to the Germany squad for the international break after Leon Goretzka pulled out with a thigh injury. Gnabry did not appear in Germany's humiliating 3-0 loss to the Netherlands, but with Germany goalless in the UEFA Nations League and facing relegation, that is a thing that's happening,
yes.
He started against world champions France in his favoured position as a second striker in a 3-5-2. He was lively and forced a save from Lloris as Germany was chasing in the second half, but didn't end their streak of winless games without scoring from open play.
Yikes. Yikes for Germany. But at least Serge Gnabry's playing?
They could actually be relegated in the Nations League.
That is not a thing.
Yeah. I mean, I would have bet all the money on the Netherlands just given how badly things were going.
2 years ago, that sentence that you just said would have been very confusing.
Yeah.
Germany are about to be relegated in the Nations League. Like, what now? A final report comes from Eric Edston, scouting Callum Hudson-Odoi, the 17-year-old English winger for Chelsea. Callum started in both of the England U19's games this international break. He scored and captained in their game against Macedonia.
Go on, Callum Hudson-Odoi, one of the U17 World Cup heroes. All right, thank you to everybody for the scouting reports. I will be assigning more players to scouts later this week. Keep the requests coming. If you haven't got yours and you want yours, email me, daryl@totalsoccershow.com. I will make sure to get you a player.
Play Freebird.
Excuse me?
Play Freebird. Keep the requests coming, baby. I just wanted to be the 1 billionth jerk to say Freebird. Yeah.
I did once yell at a band, Stairway to Heaven.
Oh, no.
They were an REM tribute band.
That's outstanding, Daryl.
But they were two of the guys were my cousins, so I sort of knew them, so they knew I was joking.
That's shades of in Step Brothers when Horatio Santa's Billy Joel cover band only covers like a very specific part of Billy Joel's catalog.
Yeah.
I like that.
So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be off on Friday. We're taking the day off on Friday, but we'll be watching soccer this weekend, and we'll be back on Monday with I'm going to say our newly formatted weekend review, where instead of trying to watch all the action and nearly go blind in the process,
pretty much,
we're essentially going to pick the 3 most interesting games after they happen, so we don't pick any duds.
Yep.
And do a decent 15 or so minute review of each of the 3 best games that we find at the weekend. Candidates to be the best game, we think right now, Barcelona playing Sevilla.
Yep.
That's 2 versus 1 in La Liga, right? Sevilla top of La Liga.
You got it.
Schalke versus Werder Bremen. This is interesting because there's that quote. I've forgotten the guy's name, but there's a quote from someone at Werder Bremen saying, the time when Josh Sargent is exclusively with the U23s is over. That doesn't mean he's exclusively with the first team, but the door has opened a little wider, right?
It does.
And if Sargent can get his debut against McKennie, I don't know McKennie's injury status, that game's got to be worth watching, right?
Yeah.
Plus goals.
I would say so. Plus goals.
Yeah.
You've also got Chelsea versus Manchester United.
Yes.
7:30 a.m. on Saturday morning.
Isn't that early on Saturday?
It is indeed. Yeah. So I think, especially West Coast, commiserations to Chelsea and Man United fans. Sunday afternoon, you've got Inter Milan versus Milan, AC Milan.
What, two
Milan
teams from
derby.
the same city?
Right,
That
in the
must
same
be
stadium.
A derby, yeah. And of course...
they're still in the same stadium, right? San Siro? They're still there.
I think so, yeah. They probably need to do something. But
they are, but I feel like they have been for a while.
And of course, because ESPN told us to, we will be watching Frosinone versus Empoli.
Frosinone?
Frosinone versus Empoli, 18th versus 19th in Serie A, 6:30 a.m. Saturday morning.
I'll see you in the studio, right?
I'll meet you here.
All right.
I'll bring some coffee.
I will be here.
Iced coffee?
I will be here.
With almond milk?
I'm making direct eye contact with you. I'm not so big on the iced coffee with almond milk. No.
Or the watching that game.
Yeah, or that either. Yeah.
All right, Taylor
What
Rockwell.
a terrible decision to promote that game.
Don't understand.
Did you say it was 18th versus 19th?
Yes.
Yikes.
At least it's not bottom game. Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Not technically the worst game. Right back at you, buddy.
Because the 20th team can't play itself. Listeners, thank you for listening. A final reminder, if you want to get your questions to us for next week, it's totalsoccershow.com/questions. For the behind-the-scenes questions, it's totalsoccershow.com/ask, where you can ask us anything. Till then, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.